The hotel chef found me alone in the kitchen, then whispered, "See me alone after closing." Part 1. The Lights That Stayed On. The kitchen cameras were still recording at 11:15, and Isabelle Cooper was standing by my walk-in refrigerator with budget sheets shaking in her hands. The exhaust hoods had just shut off. One moment, the basement kitchen of the Harrow House Hotel was all fire, fan noise, shouted ticket times, and pans hitting burners. The next, the room dropped into a heavy metallic silence. Heat still lived in the walls. Citrus degreaser cut through the lingering smell of charred thyme, roasted bones, browned butter, and bleached steel. Clean saucepans hung above the line, catching the red blink of the security light over the service doors. No one from the executive floor came down here after closing. Not unless something had gone very wrong. Isabelle stood near the walk-in in a white button-down shirt, dark slacks, and flat shoes that made sense on tile. Her long dark hair was tied back loosely, but a few strands had escaped around her face. She held the papers against her ribs like a shield. When my clipboard clicked against the prep table, she turned too fast. I kept both hands visible. "The kitchen's closed," I said, keeping my voice low. "But the cameras are on, and Thomas is still in the locker room finishing payroll sheets. You're safe to tell me why you're here." Her eyes moved to the red recording light. "Good, I wanted her to see it." Isabelle Cooper had been the hotel's director of food and beverage for 3 months. She had inherited a department full of inflated invoices, lazy purchasing habits, and old favors disguised as vendor contracts. She was brilliant with numbers, but the man above her on the org chart, Vance Merrick, had spent every week since her arrival trying to make her look unstable. Vance was the vice president of operations. He controlled procurement access. He controlled the board calendar. He controlled which reports reached the ownership group first. He also wanted his nephew and Isabelle's job before the hotel's ownership review. That was why she was trapped. If she accused him without proof, he would call her emotional and bury her under policy memos. If she went to the board too early, he would show them his altered spreadsheet first. If she resigned, she lost the contract clause that protected 6 months of severance in her professional name in the city. And if I ignored the papers in her hands, my kitchen would become the room where he finished the job. "What did he change?" I asked. Her throat moved once. "The tasting menu budget. The version I approved with your cost sheets showed 22% food cost. Vance submitted a version showing 38. Then he scheduled an emergency board tasting and claimed I had approved an unsustainable luxury menu." I took the top sheet from her without touching her hand and laid it under the prep light. The numbers were wrong before I reached the 3rd line. "Those aren't my yields," I said. "No, they're his. He doubled the protein weights, added phantom vendor fees, and removed the local produce credits. If the board accepts this version, he can terminate me for financial mismanagement." "When is the tasting?" 2 weeks, she said. "But he already told procurement to watch my requests. If I requisition replacement ingredients, his people flag it. If I ask for a delay, he says I'm not prepared." I looked through the walk-in window. Inside were labeled bins, dated stocks, sealed prep containers, and the ordinary ingredients executives never respected because they did not cost enough on paper. Carrots, celery root, onions, local mushrooms, chicken bones, day-old sourdough, citrus peels saved by pastry. Good cooks knew what those could become. Bad executives only saw unit cost. I slid the paper back to her. "You don't need replacement ingredients. You need documented proof that his budget is false and a menu built from approved inventory that the board can taste." She stared at me, almost afraid to understand. "That would take kitchen time." "We have kitchen time after service." "And if Vance says we hid the work?" "We don't hide it." I opened a fresh inventory log. "Thomas witnesses prep records. The cameras stay on. Every gram gets weighed, dated, and signed. We build a menu he can't break because it will be cleaner than his lie." The compressor hummed behind her. For the first time since I found her, her papers stopped shaking. "What do you need from me?" "Original vendor invoices, cloud backup, the board packet he submitted, written authorization for a documented test menu using existing approved inventory, and no closed-door secrets." Her gaze lifted to mine. "You're very careful." "I work with knives, fire, and corporate men who think a garnish costs $12 because it has a French name." That almost made her smile. "Almost. Come back after service tomorrow," I said. 11:30. Bring the original invoices. Thomas will witness the inventory log. Part 2, the documented menu. The next night, the kitchen felt less like a workplace and more like a courtroom made of stainless steel. I did not lock the doors. I did not turn off the cameras. Thomas Cooper, my sous chef, sat at the end of the prep table with black coffee, a witness sheet, and the expression of a man who had already decided Vance Merrick was a health hazard. Thomas had worked beside me for 4 years. He had seen 3 chefs burn out in this hotel, 2 directors quit, and 1 general manager pretend a broken walk-in was an opportunity for operational creativity. He trusted clean prep logs more than executive promises. At 11:30 exactly, Isabelle entered through the service corridor carrying a thick binder. "Original vendor invoices," she said. "Time-stamped cloud backup, procurement change history, Vance's submitted board packet." Thomas lifted his coffee. "Evening, Director." "Thomas, if anyone asks, I am here because Chef Brooks becomes unbearable when people mislabel mushrooms." I looked at him. He shrugged. "Am I wrong?" Isabelle's mouth softened. That mattered. Warmth in this kitchen usually came from burners, not people. I set a bundle of ordinary carrots on the cutting board. Isabelle looked at them, then at me. "That is the first course?" "That is the proof." I weighed the carrots, logged the number, and had Thomas initial the sheet. Then I started cutting. The knife hit the board in a steady rhythm, clean and fast, the sound carrying through the empty kitchen. Uniform brunoise, trim weighed separately. Usable yield documented, waste percentage written in black ink where Vance could not pretend it did not exist. "Luxury cooking is not expensive by default," I said. "Lazy luxury is expensive. Technique is cheaper." I placed a copper pan on the induction burner and added a measured spoon of butter. Isabelle stood across the table, watching the pan instead of me. Good. The work was safer than eye contact. "When the milk solids brown, the flavor deepens," I said. "Same ingredient, different result. Vance inflated the budget because he assumes quality comes from procurement. It doesn't. It comes from control." The butter turned amber and nutty. The scent rose through the cold kitchen, warm enough to make Thomas look up from the paperwork. "That smells like why I never quit," he said. "You never quit because no one else lets you label the stock shelves," I said. "That too." Isabelle laughed under her breath. A small sound, but real. Over the next 10 days, the kitchen after service became our cleanest system. By day, the hotel ran on pressure. Tickets screamed, pans flared, servers rushed through the pass. Vance appeared twice a day with polished shoes and a cold smile. Asking questions meant to sound harmless, near people who could repeat them later. By night, we built the truth. Thomas witnessed inventory. Isabelle matched invoices to my yield sheets. I tested sauces, reductions, emulsions, holding times, and plating geometry. Every dish used approved stock, documented produce, and ingredients already in the hotel's system. Nothing was hidden. Nothing was off the books. The cameras watched us work, and every page went into a binder labeled Test Menu, Board Tasting Support. On the 4th night, Isabelle arrived with her sleeves rolled up and a headache she was trying to outwork. I saw it in the way she pressed 2 fingers to her temple while reading Vance's altered spreadsheet. I did not ask if she had eaten. I put a small pan on low heat, warmed leftover staff rice with broth, folded in roasted mushrooms from evening prep, and slid a bowl across the counter with a spoon. She looked at it. "Julian, staff meal," I said. "Logged as staff meal. No accounting scandal." Thomas initialed the side sheet without looking up. I witnessed the rice. Isabelle stared at both of us. Then she sat and ate. The first spoonful slowed her shoulders. The second made her close the binder for 10 full seconds. By the 5th, color had returned to her face. "You two always this formal about soup?" she asked. "Only when committing acts of nutrition," Thomas said. I wiped down the station to give her the dignity of not being watched while she finished. The bowl was empty when I turned back. "Thank you," she said quietly. I nodded. "You'll think better with food in your system." She looked at the binder, then at the camera light, then at the prep sheets. "I'm used to people protecting themselves first." "That is what the paperwork is for." "And the soup?" "That is what the kitchen is for." She smiled then. "Not much, enough." Part 3. Vance makes his move. The surprise audit came 3 days before the scheduled tasting. It hit during lunch service, when the line was hottest and the boardroom upstairs was full of visiting investors. Vance entered through the double doors with 2 corporate auditors and a woman named Elaine Porter from Risk Management. He carried a metal clipboard and wore the satisfied expression of a man who had chosen his timing carefully. I was calling tickets at the pass when Thomas tapped my shoulder. "Company?" he said. I turned. Vance smiled. "Chef Brooks, we are conducting an immediate inventory integrity audit." "During service?" "Financial irregularities do not wait for convenient timing." "Neither does a salmon order for table 12. His smile tightened. "Primary walk-in and dry storage, now?" I held out my hand. Authorization. He gave me the form. This time, it was valid, not friendly, not fair, but valid. I read the scope carefully. Walk-in inspection, dry storage count, verification of high-value inventory, no disruption of active service beyond necessary safety compliance. "Thomas," I said without looking away from Vance, "hold the line. Ticket time's under 12. Already moving." Elaine Porter watched that exchange with more interest than Vance did. I led the auditors to the walk-in door. The red camera light above us blinked steadily. Vance reached for the handle. "Stop," I said. The word cut clean through the kitchen noise. His hand froze. "Are you refusing a corporate audit?" he asked. "No, I am enforcing food safety and chain of custody protocol." I removed the maintenance tag clipped to the walk-in handle and handed it to Elaine. "Not Vance. Mant." At 6:10 this morning, my morning cook reported frost buildup around the condenser fan. Maintenance inspected and logged a temperature fluctuation during defrost cycle. The unit is currently stable, but opening the door without risk management acknowledging exposure protocol could compromise $10,000 of protein and void the hotel's insurance claim if the temperature spikes. Elaine read the maintenance ticket. It was real. Signed by maintenance, time-stamped before breakfast. Vance looked from the tag to me. "Convenient." "Documented," I said. Elaine checked the digital temperature display. "The log supports Chef Brooks. We can inspect the sealed window and exterior racks visually, but we should not open until maintenance clears the unit or we risk taking responsibility for product loss." Vance's jaw shifted. He had expected theater. He got procedure. "We'll start with dry storage," Elaine said. Dry storage was clean enough to make Thomas proud and boring enough to make Vance angry. Flour, grains, root vegetables, oils, preserved lemons, spices, everything labeled, weighed, and signed, nothing premium, nothing hidden. Elaine opened one of our test menu binders. "What is this?" "Documented tasting support," I said. "Approved inventory, yield sheets, vendor invoices, prep logs. Thomas Cooper witnessed each session." Thomas called from the line. "And I complain every time Chef makes me initial carrot trim." Elaine's mouth twitched. Vance did not laugh. By the time the auditors left, he had found nothing except a kitchen better documented than his own department. That should have made him cautious. Instead, it made him desperate. At 9:48 that night, Isabelle came down with her laptop open in both hands. Her face was pale, but her voice was steady. "He moved the tasting." I set down my knife. "When?" "Tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock, emergency board review." She turned the screen toward me. "He wrote that delays in the kitchen suggest menu instability and that the board deserves immediate clarity." Thomas, who had been wrapping herbs near the sink, muttered, "That man needs a hobby that does not involve ruining dinner." I looked at the prep list. 5 courses, 3 fully tested, 2 not final, 14 hours until service. "Can we do it?" Isabelle asked. There was no helplessness in the question. She was asking for a professional assessment. Yes, I said, but we changed the plan. She stepped closer to the table, not to me, and turned the binder around. Show me. We worked through the night, no secrecy, no panic. The cameras ran. Thomas stayed. Isabelle sent Chairman Hale a revised agenda noting that the tasting would include a documentation review. Elaine Porter received the prep logs before midnight. Vance would not be able to claim surprise if the evidence hurt him. At 2:30, Thomas made coffee strong enough to strip paint. At 3:10, Isabelle caught a math error in a garnish yield that would have cost us 9 cents per plate. She circled it with a red pen, slid the paper toward me, and raised one eyebrow. I stared at the number. Thomas leaned over my shoulder. Chef has been defeated by parsley. Chives, I said. Emotionally, it's parsley. Isabelle laughed so suddenly she covered her mouth with the back of her hand. The sound did something good to the room. Part 4, the 5-minute reset. At 4 o'clock, exhaustion hit all of us. Isabelle dropped her pen. It rolled under the prep table and disappeared beside a floor drain. She braced both hands on the steel edge and bowed her head. I should have caught the altered spreadsheet sooner, she said. The kitchen quieted around that sentence. I turned off the burner under the reduction and set the pan aside. The sudden absence of bubbling made the room feel larger. Thomas stopped moving near the sink but did not interfere. You caught it before the board voted on it, I said. Barely. Barely counts in kitchens. She looked up. I picked up a clean side towel and placed it beside her hand. Then I set a glass of water next to it. 5 minutes, I said. Water first. Then you call Chairman Hale and tell him the packet includes 2 versions of the budget. His board should hear that from you before Vance frames it. She stared at the towel. No speech fixed her. The next action did. She drank the water, wiped her face, opened her laptop, and made the call. Her voice trembled on the first sentence, steadied on the second, and by the third, she sounded like the director Vance had been afraid of from the beginning. While she spoke, I returned to the reduction. Thomas checked the cold holding cabinet. The room found its rhythm again. At 6 o'clock, the kitchen smelled of roasted carrot, mushroom consommé, citrus custard, toasted sourdough, and strong coffee. At 7:15, the pastry team arrived and stopped in the doorway, staring at the line of labeled tasting components. Private war? One of them asked. Documented exercise, Thomas said. That means yes. At 8 o'clock, Isabelle signed the final cost sheets. At 8:30, Elaine Porter came down in person, reviewed the binder, and quietly signed the risk management verification page. At 9:40, I changed into a clean chef's coat. Thomas inspected the buttons like I was a plate going to table. You'll do, he said. High praise. I'm saving emotion for the risotto. We are not serving risotto. I know. That is why I still have emotion. Isabelle returned from her office in a navy suit, carrying the board packets herself. No shaking papers this time, no hiding. She walked into the kitchen like the floor belonged under her feet. Ready? I asked. She looked at Thomas, then at me. Ready? We rolled the tasting cart into the service elevator. The doors closed. For 15 seconds, there was only the soft mechanical hum of the elevator and the faint clink of covered plates. Isabelle stood beside me, both hands around the handle of her packet case. You kept the cameras on, she said. Yes. You brought Thomas in. Yes. You made it impossible for him to make this look like a secret. That was the point. She nodded once. I noticed. The elevator doors opened before either of us could say more. Part 5, the board tasting. The boardroom was all glass, polished wood, and quiet money. Chairman Hale sat at the center of the long table with 3 board members, Elaine Porter from Risk Management and Vance at the screen. Morning light cut through the city behind them. Silver water pitchers gleamed beside stacks of untouched notepads. The room smelled of coffee, expensive cologne, and someone else's confidence. Vance's smile faltered when he saw the binders. Good. Isabelle set one packet in front of each board member. Before Chef Brooks serves the menu, she said, I need to clarify why this emergency tasting was moved forward and why the budget numbers you received last week do not match the hotel's original vendor records." Vance stepped in immediately. "Chairman, this is an attempt to distract from operational underperformance." Chairman Hale raised one hand. Vance stopped. Isabelle opened her packet. "Page 1 is the spreadsheet submitted to the board under my name," she said. "Page 2 is the time-stamped vendor export from our secure backup. Page 3 shows the change history, the inflated protein weights, duplicate vendor fees, and removed local produce credits were entered from the operations administrator account after my approval." Elaine Porter leaned forward. "Risk management has verified the access timestamp." The room changed. Vance's expression did not. His eyes did. I stepped to the side of the boardroom table and served the first course in silence. Roasted carrot confit with brown butter emulsion, toasted hazelnut, and celery leaf. The aroma rose into the expensive coldness of the room, nutty and warm, the kind of smell no spreadsheet could fake. Chairman Hale took the first bite. He paused, then took another. "Cost per plate?" he asked. Isabelle answered without looking down. $2.14, 78% contribution margin at projected banquet pricing. The second course followed. Mushroom consommé built from trim and stems, clarified until it shone dark amber in the bowl. Then sourdough gnocchi with herb oil. Then chicken roulade built from approved banquet inventory. Then citrus custard using surplus yolks from pastry prep. Each plate came with a cost sheet. Each cost sheet came with a yield log. Each yield log carried Thomas Cooper's witness signature. By the final course, Vance had stopped pretending to smile. Chairman Hale closed the packet. "Ms. Cooper, your documentation is clear." "Thank you." "Chef Brooks, your menu is excellent." "Thank you, sir." Hale looked at Elaine. "Begin a formal review of the operations administrator account and all budget alterations tied to Mr. Merrick's department. Effective immediately. Procurement access is suspended pending investigation." Vance stood. "Chairman?" "Sit down," Hale said. The room went still. Vance sat. Isabelle did not look relieved. She looked ready. "Chairman," she said, "I also request that all future food and beverage budget approvals require dual sign-off from culinary and finance, with risk management access to change history. No single operations executive should be able to alter approved cost sheets without a visible audit trail." Hale nodded once. "Approved." That was the victory. Not Vance's silence, not the board's praise. The system changed. Part 6 after the fire. 2 days later, Vance's access badge stopped working. The official language was administrative leave pending financial investigation. The kitchen translation was simpler. He was gone. Procurement was moved out from under operations. Isabelle's contract was amended to report directly to Chairman Hale for the rest of the fiscal year. My kitchen budget was approved with transparent cost controls and no surprise interference. Thomas received formal recognition as culinary operations witness and inventory lead. He pretended not to care. Then he framed the memo in the staff office. The hotel did not become peaceful overnight. Kitchens do not become peaceful. Tickets still came fast. Vendors still delivered late. A dishwasher still flooded the mop sink on Monday, and pastry still stole my sheet trays on Tuesday. But the pressure changed shape. It became ordinary pressure again, the kind that could be solved with prep lists, clean knives, and enough towels. Isabelle came down more often after that, but never like the first night. She came with purchase orders, signed vendor sheets, and questions about seasonal produce that belonged in actual planning meetings. She stopped standing near exits. She stopped holding binders like armor. She learned that Thomas kept emergency chocolate in the dry storage behind the smoked paprika. And Thomas learned that Isabelle could find a missing invoice faster than he could find his reading glasses. One afternoon, she watched me rebuild a sauce that a junior cook had split during prep. The young cook looked ready to disappear into the floor. I took the pan off heat, added 1 spoon of cold stock, and whisked until the emulsion came back together, glossy and smooth. "Most things break before they are lost," I said to him. "Learn the difference." The cook nodded. When he left, Isabelle stayed near the prep table. That sounded like advice for more than sauce, she said. It was mostly for sauce. Mostly? I rinsed the whisk, maybe 70%. She smiled, and the kitchen did not feel smaller because of it. That Friday, service ran clean. Not easy, never easy, but clean. Tickets came fast, pans hit flame, servers moved through the pass. Thomas shouted for more parsley and then looked at me like he dared me to correct him to chives. I did not give him the satisfaction. At 11:15, the exhaust hoods shut off. The familiar silence settled over the basement kitchen. I wiped down the stainless line, slow and methodical, letting citrus degreaser cut through the last trace of smoke. The walk-in hummed, the clean plates dried in neat racks, the camera light above the door blinked red. Still recording? Good. The double doors opened. Isabelle walked in carrying 2 glasses and a bottle of sparkling water. No binder, no emergency, no papers held like armor. She set 1 glass on my side of the prep table and poured. Condensation formed instantly, cold against the steel. Chairman Hale signed the new vendor contracts, she said. The budget structure is final. Procurement cannot alter culinary sheets without dual approval. Good. Thomas's new title is official too. He'll complain. He already did. Then he asked whether the title came with a better label maker. It should. She smiled and looked around the kitchen. The same room where I'd found her cornered by numbers now looked ordinary again. Steel, tile, prep tables, knives on magnets, the steady hum of machines doing exactly what they were supposed to do. I also want to say something clearly, she said. I set my towel down. She remained across the prep table. The boundary stayed there, clean and comfortable. What you did for the board tasting protected my job, she said. But the way you did it protected my name. You kept records, you kept witnesses. You never asked me to trust a closed door or a secret. The glass in my hand was cold. That was the only way it should have been done. I know, she said. That is why it mattered. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she lifted her glass slightly. To honest work? I touched my glass to hers. The sound was small, bright, and steady. She took a sip, then looked toward the staff table in the corner. I missed dinner again, she admitted. I glanced at the lowboy cooler. There is staff meal left. Logged properly. Witnessed by Thomas. Then I would like to stay for that. This time, there was no crisis hiding inside the invitation. No promotion, no bargain, no locked room. Just a clean kitchen after service, a safe distance across a steel table, and a woman choosing to remain when she was finally free to leave. I pulled 2 bowls from the shelf. Isabelle picked up the spoons. Part 7, What Stays? We ate at the staff table under the softest light the basement had to offer, which was still not soft at all. The meal was simple: chicken broth, rice, mushrooms, and the last of the roasted carrots from prep. I set the pot between us, not plated, not garnished, not trying to prove anything. Isabelle took the first spoonful and closed her eyes for 1 steady second. That tastes better than half the board menu, she said. That is because no one asked it to impress billionaires. Lucky soup? Very lucky. She laughed, and this time the sound did not seem surprised to be there. Thomas came out of the locker room in his coat, saw us at the staff table, and stopped just long enough to assess the scene. Is this a meeting? He asked. No, Isabelle said. Is there a form I need to witness? No, I said. Thomas looked almost disappointed. Shame, I brought a pen. Go home, I told him. He pointed at Isabelle. If he starts explaining broth ratios, fake an emergency call. I heard that. I said, you were meant to. He left through the service corridor, whistling badly. The kitchen settled again. Isabelle stirred her bowl. He cares about you. He cares about the kitchen. That is not a correction. I did not argue because she was right. After a while, she set her spoon down. I was afraid the first night. I know. Not of you. She looked at the red camera light, then back at me. Of needing help. Of giving Vance another way to make me look weak. You did not look weak. I was standing beside a refrigerator at midnight with papers shaking in my hands. And then you brought invoices, signed authorization, called the chairman, presented to the board, and changed the approval structure of an entire department. She looked down into her bowl. When you list it that way, it sounds better. It is better? Her smile came slowly. I cleared the bowls when we finished. She helped without asking, carrying spoons to the dish pit and wiping the staff table with the same careful attention she gave spreadsheets. It was a small thing. Maybe that was why it stayed with me. Some people only liked kitchens from a distance. Isabelle was learning the room by touching the unglamorous parts. At the dish pit, her hand reached for the same towel as mine. Our fingers nearly met, then stopped. Neither of us made it awkward. The towel stayed between us on the steel edge. She picked it up first. "I have a reservation tomorrow," she said. I looked at her. "Not a business one," she added. "A small place 3 blocks from here. No tasting menus, no board packets, no vendor contracts, just dinner." The dishwasher clicked into its cycle behind us. "Is this an invitation?" I asked. "Yes. After the new budget structure is final, your reporting line is clean, and no one is offering anyone a title?" "That is exactly why I waited." I dried my hands. The kitchen had always been easier than the world outside it. Heat made sense. Salt made sense. A sauce broke for a reason. People were harder. People carried hidden costs, altered numbers, old wounds, and exits they never mentioned until they were already using them. But Isabelle stood in front of me with no paperwork in her hands and no crisis between us. That mattered. "What time?" I asked. 8. I finish prep at 6. "Then you have time to change out of the chef coat." "I own shirts?" I am relieved. "Some have buttons." A promising start. The laugh she gave me then was not tired, not nervous, and not stolen from a moment of panic. It belonged entirely to her. I walked her to the service corridor, not because she needed escorting, but because the hotel basement was a maze and the east elevator still stuck between floors if you hit the button too hard. At the door, she turned back. "The first night," she said, "you told me the cameras were on." "Yes. That is when I believed you." The words landed quietly. I nodded once. She left. The kitchen door swung shut behind her, and the room returned to the hum of refrigeration and the clean smell of steel. I stood there for a moment longer than necessary, then went back to the prep table and opened my clipboard. Saturday prep list, vendor confirmation, staff meal, dinner at 8. For the first time in a long time, the final item on my list had nothing to do with survival.